When something bad happens, something doesn't go your way, dang it. Learn from it, move on. Something fantastic happens, okay, cool. What's next? There's always what's next, no matter it's good or bad. So yes, the answer to your question is I would imagine there are going to be some companies that do that. Now, to what degree they're going to create that scarcity, I don't know. But hard work beats talent because it beats it every day. You may, and I would say that in my mind. As I saw other people doing social media and doing media work and video work, I would say, you may be more talented, but I'm going to outwork you. And that was one of my driving forces too, is that I would put in the work, and my stuff may not be the most highly produced stuff. It may not be as slick as yours, but I'm gonna produce more of it and more channels. And you can't go to any social media platform and not at least get a taste of dynamic discs. Hey everybody, this is Bobby Cool Daddy Slick Breeze, and I'm here on the Chain Clankers podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Chain Clankers podcast. We are super excited to bring this episode. Today we got to talk to Bobby, and this is, I am going to say, probably one of my favorite episodes we've ever recorded. Tell us a little bit about what we talked about today, Quentin.
Yeah, it was so much fun being able to sit down with Cool Daddy Slick Breeze. A lot of you have probably heard him on his own show, the Disc Golf Answer Man, before. And so being able to talk to him and just pick his brain about how his journey has gone and, how he started his podcast, how he got in with dynamic discs, everyone's probably heard his voice, but to hear the story behind the man and everything that's gone on in his life and how it shaped him, and even how way long before even thinking about disc golf has shaped him and has shaped every calculated move he's making, is so much fun. This was like Horatio said, man, this is one of those episodes where we probably could have went for 2-3 hours. If we didn't have if we could have, we absolutely would have. I felt fired up after listening to the show. It was so much fun. You're going to love it. It's not going to be like every single normal episode, but I really do think you're going to enjoy the conversations that we have in this show. And one more thing, I know I shouted out a little bit in the interview, but thank you to all of you on Spotify who've been rating us. I keep getting DMs of people who saying that I finally got the rating feature and I gave you guys a 5 stars. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. It's really those folk who keep us going on. It's that motivation there. It's knowing that we're doing something good that really helps. So really do appreciate that feedback. And even if you have negative feedback, if you want to give us a 1 star, a 3 star, whatever it is, we're very open and willing to listen. But man, them 5 stars feel good. And one more thing, I'm going to stop talking about it. One more thing. If you listen on Apple Podcast, we're sitting at 51 reviews. If you're on Spotify, last I checked, it was like 41, 43-ish. I'm just saying, whichever platform gets to 100 first, I think we're going to have to do a giveaway. And then even if the other platform gets there, we might have to do another giveaway. So make sure get those ratings going, and we'll get a giveaway going once we hit 100 ratings on both of those. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get Cool Daddy Slick Breeze on the radio waves, and let's get after it. All right, guys, let's welcome in the legend himself. Y'all heard him in the intro. Super excited to talk to Bobby Cool Daddy Slick Breeze on today's show. Bobby, how are we doing tonight, man?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you guys so much for reaching out and having me on the show. I'm super excited to get into it.
Yeah, super excited, man. Usually we have players on, or just pros on, but I feel like it's going to be a cool vibe, cool to chat with someone else that's kind of in that media, that podcasting. But, let's talk a little bit about, we're interested, we only have, usually we do go about 45 minutes to an hour. So we want to get as much out of this as much as possible. So I say we just jump straight into it. Tell us your story. Go back, tell us your early days, how you got into disc golf, how you got into this career. And
absolutely. So I think it was around 2009. A good friend of mine, Jeremy Taylor, his dad had some land and was going to put a golf course on the land, but decided to do a disc golf course. And I had known them for probably about 4 or 5 years by then. But he knew that I did website and media stuff, so he said, "Hey, I'm going to build 2 disc golf courses on my land, and we're going to have a big event out here. And I want you to help me with the website and some media stuff." And I was like, "Sure, I'll do that." I'd never heard of disc golf. Didn't know it from nothing. I didn't even know what frisbee golf was. So I hadn't heard nothing about it. So I said, "Yeah, I'll help you." So at the time, Joe Rotan had lived in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, and he started Twisted Flyer. And so he came out and we did some video work and some photography work for them, and they were doing it for the event called the Green Country Open, and they called it an NT, and I had no idea what NT meant. Again, at the time, I didn't know what was going on. I just knew I was just taking pictures and creating video. Well, as I started working with them more, I started realizing that this was a big deal for the PDGA, the national tour. So it was a national tour stop there in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and as I started putting stuff out, I noticed that there wasn't a lot of media out there. So I thought, well, maybe this is a chance for me to kind of do some media work and get into the ground floor of an industry. And of course, then I started playing it, and me and my friend Jeremy Taylor would go start playing it. And my first discs was discs that he gave me, and then the way Joe Rotan paid me is he would pay me with discs. So all my discs were given to me free at first, which is fine. It was cool doing the work for him. But one of the jokes I think I tell people is that one of my first discs was given to me, and it was an Innova Groove. It was the actual tournament disc, and of course I loved it. I thought the Innova Groove was so amazing, but of course it was given to me free, and I liked the disc. But so yeah, that's kind of started my disc golf journey. Of course I just like everybody, well, just like a lot of people, when I first started and I threw a disc, I thought it was the stupidest thing in the world because I couldn't do it but throw it but 20 feet in front of me, and I thought, how is this fun? Trying to get this to the basket. And of course, after doing it over and over again and trying and getting better, I got a little bit better from it. But then from there, I met some people at PDGA, and they saw my work I did for Joe Rotan, and they had me do a few commercials. And then John Dusler, who was trying to start Disc Golf Planet TV, invited me to come out to a few events and do some stuff for that. And then the first big event I went to, like real big, that I traveled to was the Memorial. And I helped them do some they called it like B-roll and feature footage for the live show. And I remember him handing me a paycheck, and I thought, this is amazing. I'm going to get paid to do disc golf media. I'm going to do this thing, and that's really what started it all.
Yeah, that's really cool. So something that kind of got my gears going is, were you like already big into, was your job before all this media, website design, that kind of stuff? Or was it that initial, like, hey, I'm good at building websites. I'll do this for you.
I had always loved doing media. I remember I would always have a camera, and I would just film stuff at the house, stupid things, me building things and stuff like that. And then when I was in the Marine Corps and I lived in Okinawa, Japan, I had a camera, and I created home videos to send to my parents. And I just have always loved media. And at the time I was working at a credit union, and I was just what they call a member service rep. That means I would open people's accounts and help them with their accounts. And then I moved into IT because I was going to do computers. I was going to go into IT and be a help desk support. So I got a job as help desk support, but I started doing more media and social media. And I had talked my boss into letting me buy some camera equipment, some audio equipment, and lighting. And I started creating internal training videos, totally training myself to do it, just basically YouTubing it and figuring it out. I talked the CEO into doing a podcast. That helped me learn how to figure out how to do podcasts. So that's when I was like, I have a knack for this. I really enjoy doing this and creating. And so that's, like I said, when disc golf was introduced to me and I had been tinkering with the media stuff, I thought this was a great way to really hone my skill and then still be at the ground floor and try to create something.
That's really cool. Kind of just picking at that role of what do they call it? Like, a cat picks at the wool, whatever it's called, the ball of yarn. I feel like that's kind of how you were, kind of just picking at it, seeing where it kind of led, where it went, and looks like it's worked out. So, from the time, so what year was that when you got that first paycheck from doing B-roll and stuff like that for
I believe
disc golf?
it would have been probably the 2010 Memorial.
Okay, so from there, you started doing that. That was your first paycheck. And kind of what did that lead into? What doors did I open for you?
Yeah, so I started wanting to reach out to more tournament directors to see what I could do for them. And I happened to go back to Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and Jeremy Rusko was doing what they called the Showdown at the Lodge. The place on the Pawhuska land was called the Lodge. And I showed up, and I said, hey, do you mind if I take some photos and stuff of your event? He's like, sure, that's no problem. So I started taking photos, and I talked to him a little bit about the industry and what media is out there. And I said, hey, would you ever find value if someone were to just show up and take pictures of your players and make little videos and then post them on your social media accounts? And that way you can kind of build awareness for your tournaments. Is yeah, I think that would be a good idea. If you're ever in Emporia, you should, or if you're ever able to, drive down to Emporia and we'll see what we can do. So that, I can't remember when that happened, but then I was talking to my wife at the time that I really wanted to do this. I just wanted to do it and get out there. And so I looked up at the tournament that was happening in Emporia, Kansas, and I said, that's it. I'm going to go. Didn't have much money to do it. I drove down, at the time we owned an Expedition. I drove that car down. I slept in my Expedition Friday night, woke up the next morning, went to the Tournament Central. At that time, they had the old Discraft RV. And I went up to Jeremy and said, I'm here. And he was like, whoa, you made it. And I said, yeah, I'm going to take some pictures and video for you. He's like, go ahead. So I did that. And I didn't know what it was at the time of the tournament, but it was actually the Glass Blown Open. My first big, on my own, just I'm going to do this, was the Glass Blown Open. And I took pictures, like there was 88 players, I think. And I took pictures. I did video, and it had Avery Jenkins, Nate Doss, and a lot of other big names. And created a video, and Jeremy loved it. And I said, hey, I want to do this for you. I want to travel to your Texas tournaments, your Kansas tournaments, and do this. And he said, all right, let's do it. And the funny story that we look back at now, and me and him will laugh about it, is that I would drive for 8 hours to go to a Texas tournament, and he would pay me $50 and then a couple of discs. But I knew I was paying my dues. I knew that this was kind of somewhat uncharted territory, other than the Clash DVDs that were being made. This was a little bit uncharted territory where people would go out to tournaments and create. I wasn't creating tournament footage at the time. I was creating just like tournament highlights to help him highlight and make people aware of his tournaments. But he would pay me $50 for a one-day tournament, $75 for a two-day tournament. And he did that for the longest time. And I did that for a couple years, and in between, I would do stuff for PDGA and a few more things for Twisted Flyer. But then I had to kind of take a break because, I was working a full-time job. I had a family, wife and 2 kids, and spending that time on disc golf just wasn't going anywhere fast enough for me to say this is what I want to do full-time. But I started creating some tournament DVDs. I started out making tournament DVDs, and I'd sell them online on Facebook. And then when people started pushing stuff out on YouTube, I thought, well, I need to put my stuff online. So I started doing like pay-per-view. And then sure enough, comes along people like Jomez, who I love Jomez, by the way, but they started pushing stuff out for free out on YouTube. Of course, that ruined my DVD sales and ruined my pay-per-view sales. So I thought, okay, now I guess I just got to start making stuff for free. But by that time, like I said, I had to, there was a time I had to back away because I just couldn't afford to do all that traveling for that little bit of money. And there wasn't a whole lot of money in disc golf media, hardly anything. So I took a year-long break and went back to school and was trying to get my degree in computer science. And I hated school, and I said, I can't do this. And I dropped out probably after one semester. And I contacted Jeremy and said, Jeremy, I'm back. I'm going to try to make this work. And so I worked part-time again for another maybe 6 months to a year. And then it was about 2013 that I went to Sailor Ranch, and it was a fundraising tournament for Eric McCabe and Paige Pierce. Of course, at the time, they were both sponsored by Dynamic Discs. And I remember going up to Jeremy, and a guy named Adam Searle, who worked for him, was on the phone talking about some computer issues. And I said, Jeremy, when are you just going to hire me full-time? Disc golf is growing. You're growing. I can do computer work and social media work. Let's talk. And so we talked for about 6 months. And then finally in January 2014, I moved me and my wife out to Emporia, Kansas, and I started full-time working social media for Dynamic Discs. And it was like the American dream came true. I had worked hard. I'd put my time in, paid my dues, learned everything about the industry. And now I was working full-time for Dynamic Discs doing their social media work. And it was awesome.
So much to unpack from that story.
I know. Sorry, I keep going.
No. That is good. That is what the people are tapping in for. They want to hear you talk. So I guess that kind of brings up two big ideas in my head, right? The first one is talking about paying those dues. Maybe something that I think a lot of people, especially maybe in my generation, is very instant gratification. I know, Horatio, you were clowning me the other day for this, is that you want that instant gratification, right? You want to be big and famous now. You want to have 100,000 subscribers now. You want to be making money now from the things that you're doing, because maybe you're able to see other people your age or younger, whatever, doing the same things, and they're able to hit it off. So like paying those dues for you, and kind of what I'm getting from that a little bit is actually having to put that time in, put that pain, put that struggle in order to get something better. And from the timeline that I'm kind of picking up, there's about 3-ish to 5-ish years before finally getting that full-time deal. Maybe elaborate a little bit on how the paying of those dues was actually important for what came next in your career. Because I imagine if you don't have to pay for those dues, if it was, you come out, you start big, you get the deal right away, does that alter your career, do you think?
I think so, and that's always been my philosophy: is you got to put the work in. I mean, that's just all there is to it. You got to put the work in, and yes, you're right. There's the too many people these days. They see these social media influencers, get thousands of views or millions of views, and they don't. The old saying, the overnight success took me 10 years to create. There's no real overnight success because people don't see the work that they had to put in. So yeah, I had to pay my dues because that's just the way, in my mind, the way life works. People don't see the work that goes on behind the scenes. I had to learn how to do this. I had to learn the disc golf industry. And again, I was self-taught. I didn't take, I took a one course mass communications in college. I think I took a mass media class in high school, but that just, got the little spark going. I learned by myself, by doing. A lot of times I volunteered for stuff, having no idea exactly how I was going to make it happen. But I knew if I volunteered myself, I would have to figure it out how to do that. And I think a lot of people miss that. They miss the only timeline they see is the decision and then the end result. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in between that, a lot of work that you have to put in. You have to think about, in fact, I heard something the other day where you have to think about the here as opposed to the there, because you got to work on what's happening now, today, here, put in that work today, every day, consistently, so that end goal that you want in a year will happen. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just kind of thinking, I guess, how much of that mindset, or do you attribute any of that to your previous time as being a Marine? I feel like Marines are very, you're just hit the ground. You have to figure stuff out. You don't really have too much time to sit there and think. Like, you have to go and kind of do what the job is. And sometimes you don't know what it is, and you kind of just have to figure it out. Do you attribute any of that, to like just you pushing to figure something out from that experience, as being a Marine?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what they from the day one, when you set your feet on those yellow footprints, they call it, and they just start yelling at you, and it's just complete chaos. First they call it culture shock. They want to culture shock you, so there's this constant yelling, constant rushing around, and you're just like, what is this chaos going on? And they're just trying. They have a short amount of. They have 12 weeks to turn you into a Marine, and it's just basically a culture shock at first. And they need to that like life as you know it is not going to be the same. And then the constant yelling, the constant getting onto you is just that, preparing you for the unknown. And that no matter what's going to happen, you can survive in the chaos. And so absolutely. Now, that doesn't mean every time I was challenged, everything I was just like, oh, I learned this in the Marine Corps, I'm fine. No, there were nights that I was talking to my wife and I'm like, is this really what I want to do? Is this really going to go anywhere? Players don't even make money. They can barely survive. And here I want to be a media guy to make money. Is this going to work? But I just had something in me that thought, this is what I was meant to do, and so I'm going to do what it takes to get there. And I'd given up for a while, but then I just got drawn back because I just missed it, and I loved doing it. But yes, definitely the Marine Corps taught me a lot as far as the tenacity, and as far as the one of the motives that I still say in my head is adapt and overcome, and that's what they say in the Marine Corps. You have to adapt and overcome no matter what happens. You've got to reframe it, adapt to it, and then you can overcome it.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And I think that is something that a lot of other people can take away from is I can't say enough. I completely agree with that mindset. And I think that I agree as well, not even remotely the same, but I would tell my crew members back in the day, I was like, hey, to get to where I'm at, to get to where you want to be in anything you do, you have to pay your dues, right? If we want to take this podcast to the next level, if we want to have an opportunity to have the best in the world on, if we want to have the opportunity to make money, we have to pay the dues and put the hard work in order to get there. And I think that goes with any disc golfer, right? All you guys listening, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and be 1100 rated. That's not how it's going to be. You have to constantly work at your game. You have to constantly work at your craft in order to get better, which subscribing to this podcast is going to help you do that. So make sure you get that in it. Hey, quick shout out to everyone on Spotify. Y'all be really coming in with them 5 stars. And I do appreciate y'all for doing that. But let's continue down this road, right? Working with dynamic discs now, you got the bag. What is next? How did, I guess, let's talk about what were your next steps, the next couple of years. What were you mainly doing with dynamic discs?
So when I first got on there, again, it was really uncharted territory. A disc golf manufacturer hiring a social media person. I always remember that was the big thing and a lot of my people that I knew in media would contact me and say, man, you did it, man. That's awesome. Dynamic Disc is forward thinking. They hired a person that just concentrated on social media. Well, even there were not skeptical, but it was so new that actually at the beginning I worked for, of course, I'm sure everybody knows Trilogy is basically Dynamic Discs, Westside Discs, and Latitude 64. All those discs come from the same factory, and then of course they get different molds, go to different brands and whatnot. But at the time, I actually worked for Latitude 64 and Dynamic Discs so that they could share my paycheck, so that they could pay me to be a full-time social media person. So I had to look at 2 companies and figure out, how do we build awareness? How do we grow this? And then how do we use social media? And I had actually started Dynamic Discs YouTube channel. In fact, it still has my old Gmail address that I had way back when. And then I started the Latitude channel, and then I would work with the players to make sure that they had stuff they needed. And so the strategy really was at the time was awareness, awareness, awareness. And then what kind of culture did I want to create with our social media presence? Well, I've always felt like the social media needed to be social. We wanted to be transparent, and we wanted to bring value to our followers. And that was through training people, in a sense, the tutorial. So I wanted to be the cool company that you felt like we were the guys that you could hang out with anytime, have a beer with, and we were the ones that were going to help you become better at disc golf. And that was the driving force for all the content we created for the YouTube channel, for social media. And then, obviously along came Instagram, whatever social media platform, we were going to be the cool guys you could hang out with, and we were going to help you figure out disc golf.
And I would say that you were successful. I would say like that. You got that across. I know we did a tournament. I'm sorry, like what are the tournaments called that you guys set up? They give you a set of discs. The Trilogy Challenge. Challenge.
Yep.
We signed up for one our first year playing. It was up in Emporia, and we went up there and played it. And at one of the courses we were doing it, Eric, is it his name? The blondie, the one that does the Danny. I'm bad. I'm bad with the names. Yeah. And we were playing. And I was like, hey, I know you. Like, I've seen you in the YouTube videos. Cause like before that, like I was just watching those videos, trying to work on form, trying to, cram as much information as possible. So when you go on YouTube and you search up stuff, that's some of the first videos and content that pops up. So, I would say kudos to you. Like you definitely did that. Was that difficult at first? What did that look like putting those videos together? And I guess kind of how are you formatting to put those videos together?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So the strategy was, well, I'm still not a great disc golfer. I obviously love the sport. I love playing, but I don't do it for competition. I do it just for recreation. So I wasn't one to really be the teacher. So I had to figure out how to do that. And so I used at the time we had who was on the team because when I first started, we weren't quite a manufacturer yet. And so we had Paul Ulibarri, Paul Macbeth, Dixon Jowers, Nico. We had a lot of people that were on there. So I would just use them to create little tips videos. We would do in the bags. We would do player spotlight videos just to get the player's name out there. And then anytime we had a player that I would talk to, and I would say, "Wow, you're," in my mind I think, "You're good at explaining things." And so I'd ask them about, could you teach me how to, get more distance? Could you teach me how to putt better? And they would kind of teach me, and I think you're good at this. You can explain really well. And then I would get them on video. So we would use those videos to help train people or to help teach people about disc golf. So I really utilized the resources that I had around me rather than me always being on there. And of course, the transparent part was basically me becoming a presence. And I would I would do after hours at the warehouse shows where I would show you what's coming into the warehouse, and it would just be me and you. And I'd even say that it's just you and me. And I would play off the fact that like it was after the hours, nobody was here, so I could show you all the secrets and that Jeremy would not let me show. And I would a lot of times I would joke and say, "I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but let me show you." And it was all just kind of for show, just to create a show around that. So that was the transparent part. And then the other part was making sure that our staff was on camera, that Jeremy was on camera, that, the person that boxed your orders, I'd get them on camera so that when you placed an order, you felt a little bit more of a connection with people. And you're like, I like those people, so I'm going to purchase from them. So that was kind of the strategy behind it and some of the steps I took.
I think the strategy is incredible. And maybe we might have just learned a thing or two about our own strategies. So big props to that. Big thanks to that. But it's one of those things that makes me think, right? You were one of the first to do it, as well as, Dynamic Disc in general. We're one of the first to really get people on camera, have those videos, have those tutorials, those kinds of things. And Horatio, I think you can agree with me. We're two COVID players. We came in really heavy in the March when COVID happened. And so you could see, we could tell beforehand, before all of that, before the really big mass influx of players, there wasn't as much content from all the companies or even the players themselves. And now you look today, every company's putting out in the bags. Every company's putting out tip videos. Every player has their own YouTube channel. It's almost like a requirement to get sponsored in the first place. You have to have a social media. And I'm going to shout out Kona, who has a fantastic social media and just got the bag from Dynamic Disc. So it's one of those things where it's a requirement now. And it's so crazy for me to just think about that. But for you, I can only imagine how even more crazy it is from when you saw it first start to where it is today. That kind of leads me to that. Could you see other companies pulling off of what your strategy was, pulling off of what you guys were doing? And did that make you happy, or did that make you like, come on, man, this is our company, what you doing over here?
I'll touch on 2 points. So yes, as far as players needing that social media, when I was on the board of directors for Dynamic Discs, and we would have big name players come in, or when we would discuss potential players we want to sponsor, they would always come to me and they'd say, "Hey, this is a person we're looking at." And then part of my thing was to look at their social media presence and what do I thought, and then of course give my feedback off that. So yes, social media is you can hate it all you want. You could hate that you have to do it. You can hate Facebook all you want. But the fact remains is it is an important factor nowadays, because companies want someone that plays well, but they also want someone that people like on social media, because you are a marketing machine for them. You are a brand ambassador. You are an extension of their brand, and so they want to make sure that they get value out of that. So if you're listening right now and you're trying to figure out, should I be on social media? Yes, you should be on there yesterday. And I'm not saying you got to create something every day. I'm not saying you got to make TikTok dance videos every day, but you need to figure out how you can be on social media and get on social media. So to your point number 2, watching other companies do it. Yes, you could literally, I would talk to other people in media and we would talk about that, how there's certain companies that are like they're just not doing it. And that's fine with us at Dynamic Disc at the time. They're not doing it. But then you would notice them start doing it. And then they would start creating certain types of videos. And I would be like, I created those 2 years ago. Come on now. But, it's not like it was a secret formula or anything, but they would start creating certain styles of videos that I had already created. So part of me was like, really? But then part of me was like, Okay, yeah, it was kind of cool to be influential on the style of videos that was being put out for disc golf. So it's kind of twofold. Kind of proud to see it happening, and it was kind of neat because like I said, I would have people say, "Bobby, did you see them do that? That's just like the stuff you did." And I was like, "Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that they are taking notice that that is a thing that they needed to do, and they're actually doing it. And it is kind of one of those things. What is it? What's the saying? High tides, right? Or something about tides making all the boats go up. So in other words, it helps everybody if
Yeah.
more disc golf companies do media and disc golf grows. So from that aspect, it was great because, of course, Jomez and some of the other people, they surpassed me as far as talent and what they could do. And I think that's great for the sport. So I'm not like mad at you, but I think it's great. Of course, I've known Jonathan from the beginning, and we would always talk media and how much it's going to grow and how big can it get. And he was able to concentrate on the tournament coverage side, which I think is great, and he's done a fantastic job with that. But even to your point that we talked about earlier, if you don't think you're talented at social media, there's another saying that I always drove. In fact, one time I had it on as a screensaver on my phone. Hard work beats talent because it beats it every day. And I would say that in my mind. As I saw other people doing social media and doing media work and video work, I would say, you may be more talented, but I'm going to outwork you. And that was one of my driving forces too, is that I would put in the work, and my stuff may not be the most highly produced stuff. It may not be as slick as yours, but I'm gonna produce more of it and more channels. And you can't go to any social media platform and not at least get a taste of dynamic discs.
I think that's really cool to see, especially now what it's turned into. You're talking about Jonathan seeing what it could grow into. And I feel like, yes, it's kind of blowing up, in that this COVID time frame, but I think we're not even like close to being what it can be. I mean, I was on YouTube the other day, and I mean, I'm sure people can relate, but it's off season, so there's no content. So people are rewatching like old videos, old tournament, because you just want to you're ready for it to be back. And even like some of their biggest videos on YouTube, like the tournament ones, they're like 430,000. I think I saw a couple that were 500,000. For YouTube, that is not a lot of views. That's nothing.
No.
And Jomez is the number one watch channel. Like, to everyone in disc golf, Jomez is everything. Like, Jomez is huge. Like, they are it. But I think outside of the disc golf people, you talk to someone that doesn't know disc golf, it's still quite small. So what do you see? We saw how it grew in these last 2 years. What do you see it? One concern I have, and I've talked to Quinn about this, is okay, it exploded because of COVID. Everyone was bunkered down, nothing to do. Everyone came in, they found disc golf, they discovered it, boom, it shot up like Dogecoin or some of the other stuff that shot up. Is it going to continue to steadily continue going up, or is it going to come down and plateau now that majority of the people that have found it, and yes, you'll have other people introduce their friends and whatnot, but is it going to slow down now, or do you think it's going to continue at a similar rate?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's hard. I mean, I can make educated guesses based on my experience, but obviously the pandemic, COVID, is not anything that we've ever experienced in this generation. So, but I have a strong feeling that at some point it's going to not be the COVID numbers. That's what we used to call it at DD, was the COVID numbers, because yes, we saw incredible growth during the big part of the pandemic. I would say that it's going to go back to its original steady growth, where it's still growing, but not in the hockey stick way, the hockey stick graph way. And it'll slow down. How much it'll slow down, I'm not sure. But the way I think it is that if you think of a certain line, I know the audio listeners aren't going to appreciate this, but think of a certain line where sales is, and then the pandemic caused it to go way up. And then when it comes back down, it's still going to be higher than it was. So we're still going to see a benefit from the pandemic because we're going to have more eyes on it and more people playing it. But I don't think we can continue this huge double over the year-over-year sales double, month-over-month sales just doubling. I don't think that's going to keep happening. I don't think it's going to slow down to where it's like, oh, great, what do we do now? I don't think it's going to pop like a bubble. Like I can't remember. I think Altiworld put out the disc golf bubble. I don't think it'll pop like a bubble, but I think it's going to slow down quite a bit.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know Horatio has been into stocks for a little bit. I'm trying to get into the market as well, and we literally were talking a little bit about stocks, but before you joined, and that's really interesting that you're talking about. It's going to go eventually when it does come down, it will still be higher than what it was. Which I agree. I believe that yes, it will go down. I believe there will be the disc golfers who continue to stay in, and then there will be those that everything's back to normal. Disc golf was cool. Maybe I'll do it every now and then, but I'm not going to consume it like I did. So that kind of leads me to the thinking of, there's always this big supply and demand going on right now for discs. You can see dynamic. Let's say they drop some new Ricky daggers or, whatever it is, right? If they just simply don't supply enough, but they keep the demand high, I guess what I'm trying to say is that maybe even a strategy that we could see companies do to keep those sales high by not necessarily just being like, hey, we're completely caught back up. You can order as many of you want, however many you want, it is what it is. Or do you think it's almost a smart idea for companies to, hey, you can order one of these this time, maybe you can get another one next time, almost keeping that exclusivity, almost keeping that you really you have to buy it or you're not going to get it mentality?
I know it's probably going to make a few people mad, but I mean, business 101 is creating scarcity. So yes, the answer to your question is I would imagine there are going to be some companies that do that. Now, to what degree they're going to create that scarcity, I don't know, but it's just with anything else, you create that feeling of I need to get it now before it runs out. I think it's still going to be a thing. Whether that's a good practice to do, I don't know. Now, the thing is that how many times can you keep doing that and it still be effective? I don't know. It comes back to the old Zig Ziglar, sweeten the carrot. You've got the donkey, you're trying to make them go forward, so you put the carrot in front of them. Well, eventually, the donkey's going to get the carrot and eat it and be fine. Well, the next time you put it out there, you're going to have to sweeten it a little bit so to keep them going. So how many times are you going to sweeten that carrot to make sure that people are buying your discs? That's, to me, right, for me, that's kind of an unknown, and I don't know if that creates a false sense of value for the discs, so that people will kind of see through that, and then they don't want to play that game anymore, and so then the companies will have to figure out another game to play. And it's I hate to call it game because that kind of gives it a bad connotation, but it is kind of it's all a game, figuring out how do I make people buy my stuff and don't buy their stuff. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if how that can continue to play out and if it will continue to play out.
Yeah, I know Discmania is very good at that. And I'm sure part of it before was because they were stuck with certain requirements that they had the manufacturer with Innova. And so they had certain numbers that could only produce so much stuff. But I literally know people that, were Discmania fans and they loved the discs, but they wouldn't put them in their bag or throw them. They're like, I can't afford to throw these discs because if I lose them, I can't get any more.
Yeah.
And I've seen, now that they're by themselves and stuff, they put out more numbers, but they still kind of do that. And yeah, that's business 101. I mean, you have to get people to continue to buy discs. I mean, there's players who started during COVID, have plenty of discs, they have more discs than they need, but they're still buying that new release. They're still buying that new tour series, that new, because they need to have it. It's the new thing kind of thing. But I want to transfer over a little bit. In my eyes, I'm like so excited for this next season. I feel like part of it has been because it's been built up by this offseason. Contracts, people switching over, new players, like all this stuff. And I kind of want to get your viewpoint from, you've been in the game for a while. You've been in disc golf for a while. You've seen players, you've seen tours. Do you think that we're in, besides the COVID numbers and the fans, I'm talking like just talent and players. Do you think we're in a sort of a disc golf golden era because we have a massive new people wanting to become pros, finding the sport, and really young talent and especially YouTube. And I feel like bringing a new level of athleticism to the sport. And I mean, we've talked about this before, like any given weekend in MPO, there's a 15 names that could win the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
What are the differences you see, I guess, now, or I guess this year coming up than, when you started?
Yeah, I think you kind of said it, is that back in the day, it felt like, and there was a time where it was like it was always the same people at the top. And I feel like that now that there's a little more money to be made for the players, I see manufacturers, helping players tour a little bit better. Now, I'm sure they could do a little bit better for some of the touring players, but I feel like they are doing more and more. Now, as far as like 2022 compared to 2021, 2020, there's a difference. I don't know how much of a difference, but I believe that will allow more talent to be out traveling and be at these bigger tours, which would create more competition, which I think is fantastic for the sport as far as entertainment value. Although there are people that love the rivals, for a while we loved the rival between Katrina and Paige. That was, a thing. And then, of course, Ricky and Macbeth, there was a rival between those two when they were, would trade off wins at big events. So it's hard to know exactly what people are going to be entertained by, but I think that you said a golden era. I don't know that we know we're in a golden era until we experience it. In other words, how we almost have to see how 2022 plays out. It feels like it's going to be a big deal because of all the big, like you said, the big contracts, the big money. So it feels like it's going to be a big year, but I think it depends on what happens. Is there going to be a huge upset? Is there going to be somebody that that we've hardly know and they go win a big Disc Golf Pro Tour event, and all of a sudden they're known? And we're going to have moments like where Emerson Keith was third place or was working his way up to Worlds and went to someone unknown to a big name where people were talking about him all the time. So I think it depends on the moments that are created, and of course you can't predict those. You can't script those. The moments just kind of happen. I think that will dictate what kind of era it is for disc golf. Especially like the James Conrad thing. You couldn't have written that script, that amazing shot he did at Worlds. But, man, the impact it had on the sport as far as awareness was amazing. So I think it comes down to, are there going to be moments like that create this to be 2022 to be a golden era?
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. It's one of those things where almost the James Conrad was the next runner in the hockey stick graph. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like everyone was here, and then that happened, and then being on Sports Center and all these other things just continued to bring more people in. And I think you're right. I definitely agree. There's going to be people who are in the 20s and 30s or even lower right now in the world rankings that might get a win, and then they're going to become a big household name, and they're going to be able to push products. It's one of those things where, let's all be honest, Scott Stokely is probably winning Rookie of the Year this year. Brody Smith might even mess around and win an event. Like Horatio said, you can literally list 20 guys who can win a tournament on any given weekend. And you could probably list at least 10 ladies who can win a tournament on any given weekend right now. And so I agree. I think the competition right now is very, very thick, and it's only good for disc golf, in my opinion. But something that was interesting to me that you kind of started off with talking a little bit about that money factor. And I want to explore that just a little bit more, right? We're seeing contracts in disc golf like we've truly never seen before. Last year, you see Paulie get the 10-year, 10 mil. Now Rick's on that same level, and these other guys and gals are starting to get those big contracts. There's two ways to think about that. There's the one, this is fantastic. This is great for the sport. Love this. More people are going to play, all those things. It's great. The other side is a little worrying, and I've had this thought a couple of times of what happens in 4 years if Ricky's deal dynamic doesn't get a return on investment.
Yeah.
What happens for the next crop of players? Is that something you've ever thought about before? Do you see that happening? Maybe, what are your thoughts about all these big money contracts going out this year?
Well, I mean, we've got the history of other sports to help us see, but as far as disc golf, it feels like this is uncharted territory. And again, brought on by something that hasn't happened to us, which is the pandemic, because of the incredible growth. So I suppose that's with anything. It's a gamble. It's really a gamble, and you're hoping that you place your bets on the best horse. I hate to put it that way, but in a sense, yeah, it's like, yes, Ricky Wakasaki is an amazing player, but what if for some reason he has a bad year or two? for whatever reason. That's a lot of money to lose out on all that exposure and awareness. So, I think these companies are seeing that the players bring a lot of value, but I also think they're seeing that there's some risk to that. But somebody has to take the risk, and you do have to take the risk to get the bigger rewards. Yes. So with the big ones, I'm interested to see how it plays out. I know they play a lot of these people, just like you said, Kona, with their amazing social media presence, and of course, he's a great player. But it's a gamble, and we kind of just have to see what happens. And I don't want to say you hope for the best, but in a sense, that's what you're doing. You're spending a lot of money to hope for the best.
That's where I guess people like you come in, the media guys and like the people, the marketing and stuff, like you push that and you ride that on that excitement of, oh, Kona's that dynamic or Rick is that dynamic. You ride on that wave of, people being excited about it. Like, especially people here in the Midwest, like, yeah, we got Ricky back, back in Emporia. I've said this before, and I think the more players you have that can win is better for the sport, because people like rooting for different teams. That's why NFL basketball, it's so popular. People want their team to win. And, the more players you have, the more options people have. That rivalry you had back in the day, Ricky and Macbeth, that's cool. But then you kind of only have two. When you have more people, you can, I'm a Calvin fan, I'm a Kevin Jones, I'm a Ricky fan. And so, I think Ricky has a huge following. He's going to have a lot of fans. And, I think as long as he continues to play like he did this last year, that's going to be no issue. And I mean, same with Kona. I mean, I feel like last year was kind of like a breakout year for her, and very excited to see what she does. And it's going to be very, very cool to see. But, I think we've picked your brain a little bit on that. But let's talk a little bit about now. Like, where are you now? What are you doing? How are you keeping up with? There's more media guys now. You're not the only one. How are you keeping up? What are you up to now? What are some of your stuff you're working on?
Yeah, so part of my story is shifted quite a bit. So I mean, and just to be full transparency, a little over 3 years ago, like I said, I'd moved me and my wife out to Emporia, Kansas. Our kids were old enough that they lived out on their own back here in Oklahoma. And so about 3 years ago, I got a divorce. And my wife left me, and she moved to Texas and then back to Oklahoma. And I had to, during the whole divorce process, part of the issue was I moved her away. I moved her away from family, and we were living in Emporia, Kansas. I was living the dream, seeking this great career. I'd moved up. I had created all this. It was me working for two companies, and I worked it all the way to at the point it was me, and I was managing Danny and Anthony, and we just brought on Melissa to do TikTok stuff. And so I had created this amazing career. I had to hit a huge low point after the divorce. And I tried to make it work in Emporia, Kansas, but after a couple years, I was depressed, and I felt very isolated. Of course, COVID didn't help that. When you couldn't go anywhere, that didn't help the depression at all. And so then once COVID started lifting and I started traveling a little bit more back to the home to visit my kids, I thought I probably should move home. I probably should move home. And I thought, no. I have a great career. I work in Dynamic Disc, a great company that's growing and amazing. We just bought an 80,000 square foot warehouse. This is going amazing. People know me. People want my autograph. They will walk by players and want my autograph. How could I leave this great thing that's happening for me? And I remember I still remember the day I went to the gym, and this was about the middle of last year. And I went to the gym, and I got back and I started to my house and was cooking breakfast. And I just had this overwhelming anxiety about, should I move home? How can I leave this career? What do I do? What will I do if I leave this career? I don't have a college degree. I'm almost 50 years old. What are you doing? And I had a huge anxiety attack, and it felt like a weight on my chest, and I couldn't breathe. And I was just like freaking out. And I had a friend who was a therapist, and I called her and I told her, I was like, I am not doing good. And she helped me talk through it and calm me down. And she said, you need to probably start seeing a therapist. So that's what I did. I got online and I did like a telehealth thing and saw a therapist. And how he helped me was he said, okay, you've got a lot of stuff on you right now, and you've got to figure out how to get it all organized and figure out what you're going to do. So you got to figure out three things. What do you value? How do you live out those values? And then how are you going to take steps to make sure it all happens? And I came to the conclusion that I valued family, and it was not working out in Emporia, Kansas. And in order to live that value system out, I needed to move home to be closer to my kids and grandkids. And so I made the decision to do that, to leave Dynamic Discs and come home to Oklahoma. I tried to convince Dynamic Discs to let me do it remotely, do all my work remotely, but that didn't seem to pan out. But Dynamic Discs took care of me. On my final day, they gave me severance pay. They let me keep my cell phone. They let me stay on the health insurance for the rest of 2021 to allow me, Jeremy, because we had become really good friends. I would go to his house, Jeremy Rusko's house, all the time. I became friends with his wife, Wendy. So he took care of me, and he knew what was going on and what I was going through. And so he gave me help to kind of transition. So then I have been still making the transition in a sense that I'm living with some family right now. My house back in Emporia, Kansas is an Airbnb now, which has now become an investment property. So that's kind of taking care of itself. But at one point, I knew I was going to do something in social media because I had it. I was good at it, and I'd been doing it for a while. I was just trying to figure out, how was I going to make this work? How was I going to make this work on my own? And a friend of mine said, Bobby, you left Dynamic Discs, but you didn't leave disc golf. You're still Cool Daddy Slick Breeze. You still have the podcast. People still know who you are. Use that, leverage that. And I thought, he's right. And then my dad said, don't you remember before you started with Dynamic Discs, what were you doing? I was like, I was trying to build a career in media and disc golf. He goes, do that. And so I said, yes, that's what I'm going to do. So I started over with the podcast, got Robert back on because people love the banter between me and Robert McCall. Got Eric Oakley on there because I know he would be the pro player to kind of help pull people in, and he'd be going to tournaments. He'd be able to tell us what's going on. I did that. I reached out to a few disc golf companies, told them what I was doing, and I'm doing social media. So I'm like now a social media freelance, social media manager, and social media consultant. So there's a couple of disc golf companies I consult and coach with them via Zoom. There's a couple of companies that I actually do their social media. I create content. I post on their social media. And then, of course, through meeting people here, I do social media for a couple of CrossFit gyms here in Tulsa. And I love it. It's amazing. These small businesses realize that social media is important, but they just don't have the time, and that's where I step in. And it's almost like going back to my roots of starting with Dynamic Discs, starting with the ground floor. Okay, who's our demographics? Who's our audience? Who's our followers? What value can we bring? What pain points can we solve for them? And it's just like doing it all over again with Dynamic Discs, and I'm having the time of my life. I think it's great. Now, I still have days where I'm like, I need to get out of my own. I got to get in my apartment. But I have enough clients right now where in a couple months, I'm going to be getting into an apartment. I'm going to live in an apartment for a couple months or a couple years. Then I'm going to get a house, and then I'm set. I'm good to go. And again, it's all back to what we talked about earlier, putting the work in, paying my dues. I mean, I hate to say I'm doing simple social media stuff like I did at the beginning of Dynamic Discs, but that's what I'm doing because that's how I did it before. I paid my dues. I put in the work. I worked the long hours. I networked. I talked to people, making myself known. I get on podcasts with people like this, which is awesome. I think it's amazing, and I'm honored. I was humbled when you reached out, but this is all part of putting in the work and part of the process.
I'm going to ask the hard question here.
Yeah.
Do you regret the overall choice of going to Emporia? Do you think that if you could do it over again, would you make the same decision along the way? Do you think that has benefited you in the long term?
I would not change a thing. And you would say, but Bobby, you got divorced. I was married for 18 years. Now, would I have handled certain things differently, a little more, with a little more thought process toward certain aspects? Yeah, I would do things a little differently, but I can't go back and regret anything because all I can do is go forward. All I can do is reframe it, learn from it, and go forward. There's something that I tell people when I talk to them is that when something bad happens, something doesn't go your way, dang it, learn from it, move on. Something fantastic happens, okay, cool. What's next? There's always what's next, no matter it's good or bad. Take it for the moment and then move on and move forward. And I've had now, I'm not saying that it's like simple, easy like that. I still had nights, even like a month and a half ago, where I actually got COVID. And of course, that heaviness, that sickness was over me, that depression was over me. And there were times I'd lay in my bed going, oh my God, I got to call Jeremy. I'm going to call Jeremy. I'm going to ask for my job back and I'm going to go back. I can't do this. But I would, then something inside me would say, stop. You're made a decision, live with your decision and make things happen for you. And so I'd get up. And when I had COVID, I would literally get up. I'd work for an hour. I'd sleep for 2 hours. Then I'd work for an hour. Then I'd sleep 2 hours. Then I'd work for an hour because after an hour, my brain felt like it was melting because of what was going on. But I just persevered and got through it. And I had systems in place where I would work for an hour and go to sleep for 2 hours. And that system really helped me because I knew if I just got through this hour, I could take a little nap and feel better. And so even with my health and fitness, that's the same thing. I put systems in place. Wake up at 5 o'clock, go to the gym, come home, cook, and get to work. Those systems have helped me get through everything. But no, back to your question, no, I don't regret it because it's brought me to the point where I am right now, and I'm loving my life.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially you getting that connection, with your therapist and him breaking that down for you, telling you what matters. And I feel like a lot of times when you have to make decisions and if it's too hard, I feel like you were in a position where you needed someone to kind of clarify that for you, kind of to make it simple, to make you what you really needed to do. And once you did that, it was easy. Once you got over the hump of deciding what mattered to you, it was easy. And then stuff was able to flow. You were able to get back home. Your dad told you, hey, get back in it. And stuff started working. I feel like
Right.
when stuff is too difficult, there's too much, jamming. It's just not meant to be. Sometimes stuff's not meant to be. Know when to regroup, to adapt, and to figure out what you can do. And I be like water. I think it was Bruce Lee who said just be like water. When stuff's too difficult, find the easier path is going to bring you more happiness and more success. So you're doing social media now and, you're doing kind of more freelance, you're doing the podcast and you said that's doing good. What are your hopes? What are some of your goals, for this upcoming year? What are you trying to do?
Yeah. So my big goal. So like I said, I have clientele. I think in my mind, I'm thinking I can handle 2 more clients and then I'll be making close to what I made back at Dynamic Discs, which was kind of my goal. That way I didn't feel like, I hate to say I don't want to say a failure, but it felt like that was the big thing is I went backwards. I went from making a good amount of money to making nothing. And so I had to rebuild that. And so once I hit the mark where I'm making what I made at Dynamic Discs, then I'll feel great. And then I can kind of assess things and figure out, do I bring on someone on to help me and almost have maybe a disc golf social media agency and then exceed, because I have some goals in my mind. My vision board, my diary says what I want to make in a year. And so I have these goals. And so I have certain goals set that I would need to build my clientele, maybe create, eventually this might turn into some sort of disc golf social media agency where I build a business around that. Now I am dabbling in some other areas that have nothing to do with disc golf. Like I said, the Airbnb is a thing that's become an investment property. There's a group that I met through looking for support called Divorced Over 40, and it's basically just a group of divorced over 40 people that kind of support each other and help each other through the hard times, because you won't understand what it's like to go through a divorce until you go through a divorce. It's no picnic. I mean, I could tell you how bad it is, but until you feel it, you don't truly understand. So it's great to be able to talk with people that are going through similar stuff. So anyway, I've talked to some of the co-founders, and I've kind of do what I do, and I started doing videos for them and promoting their stuff, and I'm trying to help grow their business through social media. And so it's almost like social media is the core of everything, but I'm dabbling into different industries like the fitness, the gym industry, disc golf, and then of course this Divorced Over 40 support group. So I would say my goal for 2022 is get a couple more clients, get into an apartment, get a nice 2-bedroom apartment, and then just to be transparent, turn one of those bedrooms into the Disc Golf Answerman studio where I've got the fancy lights and all that, all the big nice settings, so that I can really take that podcast to another degree as far as the look of it. and then just keep coasting along, creating content, making sure that if one client, because some of my clients, I just do coaching where I just talk to them for an hour and coach them through social media. And so, after maybe a couple months, they may say, hey, we got it, I'm good, but I got to make sure that there's a network so that I say, okay, well, now I go to the next client and I'll coach you for about 2 or 3 months and then move on from there. So that's kind of my goal, to build somewhat of an agency, a social media agency for disc golf and maybe a couple other industries.
Yeah, I really love that. And it's super exciting. I've listened to your podcast since I really got into disc golf, almost kind of inspired me to kind of, want to try to do something similar, and to, even be able to talk to you is fantastic. So it does kind of lead me, I know we are getting close on time. I do want to ask at least one question about the podcast.
Yeah.
I assume everyone has heard the podcast before who listens to our show as well, but please shout it out, all that kind of stuff. But it's one of those things where podcasting really, you look 5 years ago, not even near what it is today. The growth is incredible. More people are listening to podcasts nowadays over the radio. Funny stat that I see on Twitter all the time is the amount of Joe Rogan's podcast size compared to major news networks and stuff like that. It's just incredible how so many people are now flocking to podcasts. What do you think is, I guess, the next iteration of like podcasters? Like how do you take your podcast, to that next level that you were talking about? How do you go from, I'm just kind of doing this, I got maybe 20 listeners or something like that. How do you turn that into a successful business?
Well, I mean, I think and maybe you've heard it, and I'm sure people have heard the cliches that you got to make sure that you niche down, because social media, and podcasting is basically falls under the social media umbrella. Social media is so prevalent that everybody's fighting for your attention, that if you don't niche down to something specific, then you're going to lose out. You're going to be there's too much noise, and people are just going to kind of push you to the side. So I would say you definitely need to niche down. I mean, like you said, when I first started Disc Golf Answerman, me and Eric McCabe got on. Shout out to Eric McCabe for helping me build that. I think there was maybe 5 disc golf podcasts, if that. And now I think there's like 20 or 25, which is amazing. But in order to stand out, you're going to have to figure out what is your specialty, what is your niche in order to do that. And then I know just from keeping up with social media trends, I mean, of course, Clubhouse is a big thing. I mean, that might not be a traditional, of course, podcasting is fairly new. So that's not your traditional podcast, but it falls under the social audio umbrella. So you've got, Spotify now has, I think it's called the Green Room. Twitter's got Spaces. I think I saw, Reddit is dabbling into the social audio. Of course, Discord has always had an audio component, but then they've like revamped the interface so it looks more like a Clubhouse type thing. So maybe the live stuff is a niche that some people can get into and really explore and see if kind of grow from there. But the biggest thing is doing what you guys do, put in the work, getting on here every week or every couple of weeks, reaching out to people, building your awareness, and just so I have coached a couple of people, and I think the first step is, if you want to start a podcast, is I've coached a couple of people, and the first step I say for them to do is grab a notebook paper, and I want them to write down 30 topic ideas that you would talk about on a podcast. And they were like, 30? What are you talking about, 30? And it's like, if you can think of 30 topics on one sit down, then you've got an idea for a podcast. And the reason I say that is that you can make one, and you've probably experienced this. You can make 3 or 4 podcasts and you're feeling good. But once you get to like 5, 6, 7, then the work really kicks in, because kind of the glitter kind of wears off. And it's like, okay, this takes work. I got to find people. I got to track people down and get them on the show. I've got to figure out what to talk about. Sure, I can talk about the latest tournament. That's perfectly fine. But so is 10 other podcasts talking about that same tournament. What are you going to bring to the table that's different when you talk about that tournament? Who are you going to talk about that's different, that hasn't been on other podcasts? I mean, that's why when I do my series, A Conversation With, where I'm talking to people that aren't necessarily players. They actually are doing disc golf business, but I ask them questions that aren't all disc golf. We start off with their disc golf story, but then we get into other stuff, because I know that they've probably talked to other podcasts about, what's their favorite driver, what mid did they love. They've heard it probably 3 or 4 times, so that's not what I talk about. So you've got to find something unique that you can talk about to make sure that you stand out.
That's definitely something that we've heard of and we've been trying to work on. I would say kind of our thing is that we focused on, and it's funny, we talked about this on the last episode, kind of more the AM players. We started in COVID. We have never lied. We have never said that, we're the best players. We tell everyone that comes on the show and listens, like, hey, we are new players trying to learn and trying to educate other people by us kind of being the guinea pigs, by us bringing pros on, seeing what they can teach them through us, and also by us going out to the field, going out to courses and testing stuff out and seeing what we can teach other players.
Mhm.
So I would say that's definitely, what kind of our niche is, kind of what our group of people is. And so far, I think it's worked and I've enjoyed it. People love getting that personal, like someone else understands them.
Yeah.
Not everyone can be a professional player, and not a lot of disc golfers keep up with, the pro tour. Some people just play disc golf just for fun.
Right.
And, there's a lot of podcasts that just talked about tournaments, but, I think time is getting, we definitely appreciate you coming on and we don't want to take too much more. But with that, I want to hear what your hot take is. So if you could tell everyone what your hot take is tonight.
So my hot take is that based on a conversation that I had with Terry Miller, of course, the disc golf guy, a long time ago, and he said, and I think we were talking about the popularity of disc golf, and because it's almost like every year people would say we're right on the brink, we're going to go mainstream. Every year I heard that disc golf is about to blow up, and he said, you know what? Maybe we're not as cool as we think we are. And I thought, wow. That you've got a point, because a lot of times I do see that I see people get upset that cornhole will be on ESPN, and all of a sudden my Twitter feed, my Facebook feed is full of people. I can't believe cornhole's on ESPN. We can't even get disc golf on ESPN. Blah blah. We got to pay to be on ESPN. And that reminds me of what Terry Miller said. Maybe we aren't as cool. We need to kind of slow down and realize that, okay, your Facebook feed is full of disc golf. Cool. Your YouTube is full of Jomez and Central Coast and, GK Pro and all them. That's cool. But that doesn't mean that the world knows we're not quite mainstream. So kind of, I also want to say to people, just kind of cool your jets and just be, it's going to be okay. Cornhole just is more popular. It's more popular. I don't care if you think it's stupid, more fun, or less fun, or whatever. It's more popular. And to just be okay with where we're at right now. Let's figure out how do we be at where we're at, do good at where we're at. How do we produce quality stuff? How do we make sure that disc golf is seen as a great sport that everybody can play right now? And then let ESPN worry about itself. Now, I know that there's a lot of things happening with ESPN, the Disc Golf Pro Tour, and even the Dynamic Discs is involved with stuff that's going to be happening with big ESPN and things like that. But it's like, we'll be okay. We'll be okay if cornhole's on ESPN and disc golf isn't quite on ESPN.
Hey, you got to enjoy the ride. And
Exactly.
also, let's be honest, everyone, it's a lot easier to film a cornhole tournament than it is a disc golf tournament. They're just standing there, throwing them bags back and forth. There's not a whole lot of production going into that. The production that would be required for disc golf is so significantly higher, so much more risk for the company. So that's a little understandable. Take the post-produce that we get now.
And I think and you mentioned, you guys, discovered this during COVID and pandemic, and that's a lot where a lot of people, and it was kind of I don't know what the word is for it, but like all these new eyes that hadn't been around for disc golf and hadn't seen the people putting in the work and trying to make disc golf on YouTube Live and things like that. They didn't see that. All they knew is this was a sport that they just found and they want to get into it. And they're used to seeing the football games, the baseball games, the soccer games. And all of a sudden we've got YouTube where signals are dropping and the coverage is pixelated or something like that. And what, we could only watch two players. We've only got two cameras live. Are you kidding me? And so that was kind of a shock for some of the people to realize that, this great sport they just discovered is a little bit behind when it comes to the technology. And like you said, it's so much easier when you've got three cameras just focused on one thing, or you take golf. I don't know if you guys follow Terry Roddy or know who he is, but I worked with him at Disc Golf Planet. He works for CBS Sports, and he'll post pictures, and he does for the stuff for the PGA Tour. He'll post pictures of 18 cameras that are probably $30,000 cameras, and they cover 3 holes. 18 cameras to cover 3 holes. And we're over here griping about disc golf, where it's at. And it's like, again, calm down, cool your jets. Everybody will be fine. Just enjoy it for what it is, and we'll get there.
Yeah, I love that hot take because I completely agree. You can't go anywhere, whether it's Thanksgiving dinner, unless your family, is a disc golf family, but you can't go to a Thanksgiving dinner. You can't go to work and in the break room and have coffee and talk about disc golf without getting made fun of in some way by people, laughing at you like, oh, you go out there and throw a Frisbee, or oh, that's dumb. What do you do? Like hit a tree, hit a pole. Like, what are you doing? Because that is still what it is to most people. And like you said, Facebook being tailored to whatever you look at, they can, we're not going to get into it, but, they came out and said that, if you're certain politically leaning, that's what they're going to show you. So like everything you think, they optimize it to make you think you're right. Mm-hmm. And so the same with disc golf, if all you do is follow disc golf pages and all that, all you're going to think is disc golf is huge, but you're not going to go somewhere and not get made fun of yet. But I would say to those people who say, it's not growing fast enough, it's not where it needs to be, you are, probably the number one recruiter. You can help that. All you have to do is introduce one person, whoever you can, to the sport, and not just tell them, oh yeah, I play disc golf, it's cool. Invite them out to come play with you. I have a buddy who is one of the people I play with the most, who, if you told him 3 years ago that he'd be playing disc golf, he'd laugh at you. He's kind of like cowboy and, plays football and, just a Kansas boy. But he fell in love with disc golf because I took him out there. I took the time to teach him, to show him the discs, to show him. And now he loves it. And, when I'm at work, I have someone to back me up and prove that it's not stupid. And I'm not out there, just smoking weed and throwing a disc at a tree. And so, I would tell everyone, if you want this sport to continue growing and to continue to or get bigger, then just introduce someone to the sport, bring more people in. That's the only way that it's going to grow.
Absolutely. I mean, I bet a lot of people could think back how they started, and it was somebody introduced them. Someone said, that's how I started. I got introduced through, like I said, Jeremy Taylor. And then, of course, to get into it more, he was like, hey, let's go play around at disc golf. But yeah, I would imagine most people got their start because someone said, hey, why don't you go try disc golf? Why don't you go out with me and throw some plastic?
Yeah, for sure. And if you have a friend out there who plays disc golf or kind of likes disc golf and isn't listening to either of the podcasts, you got to let them know, help them out. Subscribe to the Clankers, subscribe to Disc Golf Answer Man, and get your weekly disc golf fix. But I know we've been going pretty long. I know this is already a long episode. Horatio, let's rip through this ace round, explain it for the new folk, and let's get into it.
Yep. So these are just the same questions we ask every single person that comes on the show. And, the first one, I'm going to change it up a bit. Usually, it's you take a player to get first set of discs, what one, driver, mid, putter. But we're not going to do that. We've had plenty of players on. What 3 tips would you give to, I guess, an aspiring pro or just a disc golf player to take their social media to the next level, to grow their platform, to have a bigger presence, to when they go to potentially get those contracts or to get pushed up to the next team, they can show? What 3 tips would you give to those players?
I would say the first piece of advice I would say, if you don't think social media is important to the manufacturers when they look at you, then you need to think again. So my first tip was if you're not on social media, get on social media. Learn I would imagine most people listening are familiar with Instagram and Facebook, and probably mostly Instagram or TikTok or some of the others. But get on the platforms, learn about them, and don't worry about having to create content. Just document. Just document what you're doing. If you're going to go practice throw, take a few pictures of your discs and post it. You need to understand that one, social media is just part of the game. It's just like if you get out and you're practicing your upshots, you need to practice your social media. You need to figure that out. At some point, if you get big enough, like the Rickies and the Paul Macbeth, you can have somebody take over and pay someone to do it. And that's the thing. They're paying people to do it. If you the other big sports, these football players that have these huge followings, they pay people to do it. That's how important this is. So my number one tip would be get started, do it. Number two is don't worry about creating, just document what you're doing and someone will follow. And then I guess number three would be, enjoy the process. Enjoy it. You're going to get out there and play a sport you love, and then you're just going to enjoy as people start following you and get interested in you. And then, of course, when you land that big contract with a manufacturer, you're gonna know that it's all been worth it.
Yeah, those are really good. Nice curveball there, Horatio. I was not expecting that. So big props to you. I like
Nice.
that. I like that. I do not have a curveball because I'm not as creative as Horatio. So question number 2 we have for you. What is the favorite course you have played and one course you would love to play in the future?
Okay, so my favorite one is the one in Sweden. I was blessed with the opportunity to fly out to the Latitude 64 factory twice to Sweden and one time to Finland. But the disc golf tournament in Skellefteå, it's called Skellefteå. Yes, that's the name of the town. We went there, and of course, it was Thomas Ekstrom who designs the molds for Latitude 64 West Side and Dynamic Discs. He created the course, and they maintain the land out there, and it's just the trees, the fairways, the grass is amazing. And of course, the first hole is over 1,000 feet. If they've kept it the way, I haven't looked lately because it's been a couple years since I've been there, but the first hole is over 1,000. So they really get you when you start. But at the time, there was 3 different courses out there that you could play, and they had designed it in such a way where you could play them all different. You could almost create 5 different courses out there based on different layouts they had. And the other amazing thing is that because of where they are, compared to the equator, the sun was out a lot. So they would be literally midnight and you'd hear chains going off because people were out there playing because you had enough light to play all night. But it's an amazing course. And then, of course, I'd like to play is, what's the one where they play Blue Ribbon Pines? That shot with the long tunnel shot, I have seen that shot so many times, and I've never got to play it. I would love to go play that course.
Cool. Great answers there. All right. Next question we got is one tip you would give yourself to when you first started.
Let's see. One tip I would give myself when I first started, to realize that there is a lot more to this than just getting more distance. There's a lot of factors that go into throwing a great throw. There's the wind. There's the elevation. There's the grass it's going to land and how is it going to skip or not skip? Is it going to stop real fast or not stop real fast? There's just so many other factors that are in play to get a good throw rather than just getting up there, doing your X step and throwing a plastic. So now I think about that, and now I think about it a little bit more when I throw. But back then it was just, I'm just going to rip it and go for it. And then I'd get pissed because the wind took it the wrong way, or at least for me, it was the wrong way. It would always mess up. And so, yeah, or even in putting, same thing. You have to stop and think about the wind. And I wouldn't think of those little things. I wouldn't think of that at first because I would just go up in there and just try to throw it in the basket. So, yeah, I would tell myself, think about these little things and learn how these little things affect your throw.
Yeah, that is such a good tip. You have to have intent and purpose with the things you do if you want to have a good or a bad outcome. And I'm not going to go too deep into it, but if you don't have a purpose with your shot, if you don't have an intent with it, then you can't be mad at the result because there's nothing to base it off of. So yeah, love that tip. 4th question we got for you. What is your favorite memory playing or just being in disc golf?
I would have to say what I mentioned earlier. The first time I got a check for doing disc golf, and I thought, okay, okay, I'm gonna get. Now I didn't get paid a lot, but I got paid, and I even remember my wife at the time. I called her and said, "They paid me. They actually paid me," and so I was super excited. So that would be my most favorite moment in disc golf. I don't know that there's I've. I don't even have an ace that I can tell you. I have, well, I did. I thought I had an ace until I got made fun of because of it, because it was actually during a practice and it was actually technically my third throw. So it's not an ace, according to them, but I've had a few players tell me, no, you can call it an ace if you want to.
I'm
But I
here to
haven't had
call
any.
it an ace.
Ace?
I'm here to call it an ace. Ratio, I'm gonna mute you from it here. That is an ace. I'm counting it. Put it on the board.
All right, cool.
All right. Last question we got for you is, what is the biggest mistake you see new players make besides buying 30 discs?
I know.
First week.
Buying 30 discs. The biggest mistake players make is not allowing the disc to do the work. I've seen so many players that put such weird angles on their throw from the beginning because they're trying to manipulate a disc that is way too overstable for them, way too fast of a speed for them, because they saw some big guns throw it, so they think they got to throw it too. And so instead of realizing they're throwing the wrong disc for their skill level, they just manipulate the disc out of their hand rather than allowing the disc to do the work. And so, man, just learn what the disc does and be okay with what level you're at. And it's okay if you have to start out with a speed 9 disc to throw. It's okay. You don't have to have that 12, 11 speed disc to get distance. You don't have to. You don't have to have that to get the distance.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Bobby, this was so much fun. So glad we were able to sit down and talk to you. I know it was a long one. I know we took up most of your night, so we definitely do appreciate you coming and talking to us. Where can the people connect with you? Social media? Where can they reach out to you? Maybe if they want to be your next client, where can they listen to your podcast? All that stuff. Let's get them plugs in.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, of course, we got the Disc Golf Answer Man show. You can go to discgolfanswerman.com and see the latest episodes there. You can send in questions. That's one of the big things we like to do, is we like to answer your disc golf questions. So send in your questions. Don't ask me how to get more distance, because I've answered that question a million times. But send me other form questions, and Eric Oakley will be on there. He's the top touring pro, so make sure you can get answered from him. Robert McCall, he is excellent at breaking down form and analyzing the game. So, and we like to have a lot of fun. So you can find us on Instagram and Facebook as well. Just look for Disc Golf Answer Man. We're very much active on the Disc Golf Answer Man Facebook group, so look that group up. You can ask questions there. We talk about certain opinions. I mean, of course, the latest talk has been trying to predict where the top players were going to go as they change companies. If you're interested in having me help you with social media, you can find my personal Instagram account at Uncle Bobby Jr., and that's Uncle Bobby with a Y and then JR at the end. And just send me a DM on Instagram, and I'd be happy to see if there's something I can help you with as far as your social media presence. And
awesome.
Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. Again, like I said, when you guys reached out to me and said you'd be on the show, I was humbled and honored, and I think it's amazing. And I have to be honest, I haven't listened to any of your podcasts, but listening to you guys, I think you guys have a great future. Great questions, great feedback, great responses to my questions. I think you guys are doing a fantastic job, and I'm sure you'll be around for a long time talking about some disc golf.
Thank you so much. And we really, really do appreciate it. I think this has been maybe one of my favorite episodes that we've recorded today. It was just fun just getting to talk to you, and, because I think, we've had a lot of pros on, a lot of disc golfers wanting to be better, wanting to go pro potentially, but there are a lot of other people who, yes, they love disc golf, but they do media, or they do fitness, or they do, physical therapy, other stuff. And they want to figure out, maybe they don't like their current job or current where they're at, and they want to know, how can I make disc golf my favorite hobby and my career? How can I bring those two together? Hopefully this inspires some people. Hopefully, this gives some people answers. So I think for a lot of listeners, this will be a great episode. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons I enjoyed it. But thank you so much for coming on, for your time. We really do appreciate it. And, best of luck to you with your goals. Hopefully all those come true to you. Nothing but the best energy this year. You definitely deserve it. And, we hope to hear from you again.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for listening to the Chain Clankers podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Chain Clankers and hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to us from so you never miss another episode.